Substitution is another way to format a string, right? It's not the same as what we did before with like basic formatting like upper and lower, because you can actually use basic formatting on string substitution as well. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to format a string based off of some sort of variable. So it's a variable based keyword argument string. We'll see what that means in a second. So let's go ahead and copy and paste this first line in here and let's print it out and let's talk about it. So first of all, I have a variable that I declared as text and I set it equal to this string, right? So this says this is curly brackets variable underscore a curly brackets formatted string dot format. So dot format is the key here. And then we use variable a equals to variable based, right? So that replaced everything for us. So let's go line by line on what's going on here, or actually part by part. So if we look at this string, this is a curly brackets var in curly brackets string. It doesn't do a whole lot, right? So right now it's just some random string that just says this is a var string. So what we can use is dot format, and we can change var to being something else by saying var equals to, and then I say like ABC or really, really cool, and then hit enter, and it replaces that. So we can make it even better and say my name is, and use that curly brackets and say name as the variable, right? So name, this right here is part of the string, this right here is a variable, and then I do period, quotes, and then do dot format, and I say name equals to Justin. And again, the string is the name variable right here is equal to some sort of string, right? It's going to format it into this string itself as well. So if I hit enter, boom, that works. Now I could also say create a new variable and say my underscore name equals to Justin. So my underscore name is a variable. And now I say name is, and then I'll say the name as a new variable, and then do quotes dot format the underscore name equals to my underscore name, and there we go. So these variables, remember, these can be interchanged. A lot of times they might seem confusing at first because you're like, well, hey, it's saying name, name, and name. It says name a lot of times and it's a little confusing. But just remember that when you see something inside of these curly brackets, especially with format, those are variables that can change based on how you want to call them. Now, of course, if they're conflicting with a variable of Python, like for instance, if you said str, well, that's a built-in Python class that turns something into a string. So if I said str12, it turns 12 into a string of 12, not the number 12, which we've talked about. But the point is when you use variables, you don't want to override those types of things. So this is very basic, but it's also very cool. So let's actually go back to this and say the name is the name. Well, I can also add in /in and say the name is the name, right? So notice I'm using the variable 3 times. I press enter, and there we go. If I notice that slash is still in there, it did not format it. So if I did print this entire thing, then it would be formatted. But we see that that actual variable that's coming through is going to replace every single time. This is string substitution. It's replacing it into the spot that you called it. Now, if I did a different one, so let's say the name is the name, and then I said, let's say, for instance, I messed up on one of the variables at the end, I press enter, it's going to say key error, right? It's giving me this error because it doesn't understand that based on what we passed in the format. So I'd say the nay equals to something else, right? I'd actually have to call that, or at least declare it when I'm using this format method, right? So that's actually pretty cool, and there's definitely some more stuff on here that you can play around with as far as format with keyword arguments. So this is just a keyword argument, right? So that's a keyword right there, and this is the argument that goes into that keyword. So the next part is just regular arguments. So arguments that aren't named, basically. We don't give them a name, we just have them in some sort of order. So to do this, we'll say text equals to this is a argument, and we'll just put in 0, not a name, right? Just a position number, basically, is 0, and then you do dot format, and I just put in whatever I want. So here, that is position 0. I press enter, and then I do text, and I see that that argument's there. And just like what we did with the variable or the variable argument or the keyword argument, we can do the same thing with the position of the regular argument itself. So again, repeating it. Now, something like this is going to really stick in once you actually play around with it. So I definitely encourage you guys to check out this as much as possible. And of course, with this argument, you can also add in multiple others. So I could say another here, and then we can use text again. And notice another is not actually coming through until we change, let's say, one of these curly brackets to being 1. And then we do text again, and now we see that it actually changes it. Right, so all of this stuff, the string itself could be a variable. It doesn't have to actually be the string to run format on it. So what I mean by that is if I said BC equals to this string right here, and then bc.format, and we will do here and another, just like we did, press enter. It comes out just as expected. So BC itself is really what it's all about. And then once you add the format part, it will replace things. So there's another one is this %s substitution. So this is a little bit more concise. In many cases, you'll probably just use this sort of string substitution versus the format one, especially on a much shorter sentence like, hi there, your name. So we'll do %s here. And hi there, thanks, right? So this sort of string, you might probably just use string substitution versus the formatting method. So string substitution then would be, or excuse me, % string substitution, you would do % and then whatever you're trying to replace there, and I'll say Justin, right? So that is how you do that. Hi there, Justin, thanks, right? So that's a very simple way to do string substitution using this % method. Another thing about this is when you use the %s, a lot of times that will be rendered very easily and well for you depending on what you're working on. So let's actually look at this string right here. If I copy this and I see, notice I say the %s formatted string is very, it's not as robust. It's not as robust as the other one, but still, it still works, right? So what we see here is double S. So if I actually wanted %s to be inside of a % formatted string, then I would actually have to do 2%. That's if you wanted it in there. Not exactly sure why you would, but it is something to note. Okay, so the next thing is float substitution. So float substitution is float numbers on how we're going to do it. So this is really straightforward and simple. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this and paste it. And what we see here, let's try that one more time. And what we see here is the various ways on how you can put a number. So this is 20, and it turns into however many decimal places. So %.0 or the number of decimal places you want. F will change it. So 2 decimal places is 20, and then it goes .0, and then so on, .400. That's how you do string substitution with a float number. And of course, this could be a very long number. So let's actually go ahead and show you a very long number. So if I did this text and I did 123 and then some long decimal place here, let's make sure they're all numbers or float, and I press enter and do text, it's going to bring it to 2, right? So it will always format it in the way that we want to see, which is really cool. So it's something that you can use quite a bit, actually. The last thing that I want to talk about for substitution is date substitution. Not going to go into this a whole lot because there is a lot of documentation on there. But the point is you can actually get, using a built-in Python function called datetime, you can actually get what today is, right? So this is 2016, it's June, and it's the 7th. So this is how you actually get that date. And you can actually do a datetime, so datetime.now, datetime.now will actually give you to the second, right, to the millisecond even. So that's actually giving you the accurate time in my time zone as to what it actually is, right? So it's 17, that's a 24-hour clock. It's 5:06, so this is minutes, seconds, milliseconds. Really cool. Now, if we wanted to format this stuff, we would use all of these different things. So I'm not going to really go into this a whole lot other than the fact that these are some standard types of formatting methods that you can use. So you can see here that if I wanted to use today and it says like shift time basically, or string substitute time, it will actually show us in a date format. That in the US this works. It might be a little different elsewhere, but in the US that's kind of a shortened version of the date for today. And then you could add the time itself. And right now this is the time, right? This is the UTC time actually. So that's a universal time. And then we also have our local time and so on. So there's definitely a lot of ways on how you can format dates. And this is just a reference for you to use it if you ever need it. The most important part here is this actual updating of the time comes from a Python datetime object. That's kind of important. If you ever end up going in this and it's not working for some reason, that's why it wouldn't be working. But if you use import datetime and you do all this stuff, then you should be fine. Cool. So now that we've talked about string substitution and a lot more with strings, what we're going to do here is we're actually going to now create a function to craft some sort of message based off of all the stuff here. That is a date substitution, float, and also using format, so keyword, argument, format substitution, as well as maybe some other things that we talked about as well. So if you have any questions, you can let us know now in this section, because we're going to pause for a second. Let us know now based on this stuff. If it's confusing at all, definitely go back, but really playing around with it and going on this Python cheat sheet is really going to help you really kind of understand how all of this stuff works. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump into the functions now.